Welcome to What the Biz, where we talk about building successful businesses, balancing life, and all the WTB in between. With your hosts, me, Richard Pyatt.
I'm Brigitte Vector.
And I'm Dan Prochko.
Well, hi there. Thanks for coming back and finding us here on What the Biz. Clicking that green arrow and joining us once again as we talk about some of the things that might be vexing us as entrepreneurs or successes and all of that in between those two. Dan and Brigitte are back here too. I'm Richard, and welcome back, everybody.
What's up? I've had a good week. So I'm excited to be back because, we're talking about a topic, about growth 1099s today, but we hired our sixth employee.
Wow.
So sixth, yes, or sixth team member, I should say. I don't know if owners count as employees. Anyway, sixth team member. So we're up to six, which is crazy because the last four hires have really been in the last 8 months. And, all the time before that, meaning years, was just two people. And right. The acceleration is insane. So it's really, really cool. I get to offload more off my shoulders. Web work. We got what we're just calling a webmaster, which is not really what their role is, but it's just what we called it internally. And they're helping us with a lot of web stuff, which is awesome. So exciting.
Congrats.
You're hiring too, Brigitte, right?
We'd always kind of have an open position sitting out there. Because I feel like we've hit a lot of growth. So just having, something out for our next A player on the team is, I don't know if it'll ever go away, to be honest.
Yeah.
I just always have an existing role for the right person.
Mm-hmm. I mentioned in the last episode that I have one person that is a 1099 contractor who helps me, and I like to say very sparingly because I watch that budget a lot. My business is at the time of this recording about 2 years old, so we're still waiting for the spurt of growth that the two of you are having and endeavoring toward that. But I mentioned in the last episode that I had somebody say to me, hey, you might consider adding to that team of folks that are working for you as a 1099 sooner than later, which was an interesting thought. At any rate, looks like we're all having those thoughts, and I bet a lot of business owners do.
Yeah, I think once you finally get the right people in play, though, I'm sure Dan feels this. Like this week, I'm working remotely. I'm hanging out in Hilton Head for the week. And the amount of tasks that used to be on my shoulders that are not, I still have plenty in the business that I'm working on, but I've shedded a lot of the hard deadline tasks and the must-do tasks. And this is the first time we've been out of town with me working remotely where I can choose to say, I don't have to do that today, which is, so
amazing. Happy for you. Way to go.
Yes.
That's awesome.
I would say that's one of the dreams I have, is that this moves without me having to drive it. Does that make sense? Or at least not entirely.
Oh, that absolutely makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I always say, find your systems and processes. Once you get those outlined, it gets a lot easier to get to that point. But
right, someone like learns what those are. Sorry.
Yeah, I really like what you just said. Somebody said something about it moves itself forward, and finding with a team, everybody knows their responsibility. They're motivated to get those done, and that motivation drives the business forward. And there is this desire for the growth, desire for improvement, and it drives itself a little bit, But like you said, Rich, you got to have the processes.
Well, that and sharing the vision, I feel like with the team, us being in fourth quarter right now as we're recording this, we've really started outlining what next year looks like and goals. And when you are able to give team members that vision and those goals and what they get out of it, and everybody's rowing in that same direction, it's amazing to see where things go. I will just say when you add those employees or those contractors, adding that management hat on is a whole learning curve.
Hmm. Right. And the team member thing you mentioned and sharing the vision, I think it might be tempting to hire someone and say, here's the job I need done, which might not really convey what the vision is, right?
Yeah, and I would argue to say we've seen it ourselves. I've seen it in clients I work with. I've seen it in masterminds. Not only do you have to share the vision once, it should be something that is shared and tracked every single week. Whether you're using employees or 1099 contractors, your 1099 contractors should be well aware of what your vision is and the role that they're playing in their scope of work and what they're accomplishing under that contract with you. I would argue that anybody on your team should be.
That's such a good point. I've said over and over again around like just goals alone or humans, we're so bad at long term. Like setting a goal for a year, like, oh, I want to do this year. It's like, when do you end up doing it? It's like in the last 3 months of the year, you end up doing it. It's because we're so bad at understanding time. And that's the same thing with vision and staying aligned. You know, we'll be on the same page for 7 days, like a week. But that second week, we start drifting apart. The third week, drifting apart. And definitely within 3 months, people think the business is one thing or like we're going one way. Other people think it's going another way. And it's like, no, how do we get everybody back on track? And it's exactly what you said, Brigitte. Oh, man. Oh, yeah. Got to keep them. You got to repeat it so much you're sick of it is really what it is.
And to us as the business owners, we feel like we are sick of it because we're like, we know the vision, right? We're thinking of the vision, we're living the vision, we're passionate about the vision.
We've internalized it.
Yes, but the people on the team don't have that same level of involvement, I guess you would say, in what's in your head or what, you're going for. So I always feel like a broken record, but I what Dan was just saying, like even 2 weeks down the road, you can tell you got one oar from somebody going the opposite direction of everybody else. So, yeah, we've implemented a 1-page document that literally is the vision and goals. And then everybody has KPIs, they have their own performance things that go to it. And we touch on it every single week at this point.
I would venture to say the 1099 crew as well may be the ones that are the most distant from the vision, in the sense that if they have multiple clients for whom they're doing work, they're not living your vision unless they're with you potentially.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it's super important to keep them reminded. I saw a cool trick where instead of inviting, because they don't have to be on your team meetings, right? There's no expectations of those 1099 contractors to necessarily be there. But you can send them a recorded video of that meeting. You can send that, there's ways to bring them in, or just pieces of their scope of work, making sure that it's tying back to their goals, to the vision that you have.
So if they click on that video and watch it, does that time go on their list of billable hours?
Depends on how they treat that, I suppose.
Yeah. So what is and what isn't a contract worker?
Oh, the $1 million question. I guess I can start on this one. So
well, I think I was aiming it at you because you have that official definition in your head.
Sure. The IRS definitely has some pretty strong considerations of what an independent contractor is. And I'm going to give my little legal disclaimer here. I am not giving advice. And if you have further questions, please follow up with a lawyer or your tax professional or whoever you work with on that side. But typically an independent contractor, they are in business for themselves. They provide services to other businesses or other people. They're typically considered self-employed. And a business owner can hire an independent contractor to provide certain services for their business. So for us, if we were to outsource marketing, that would be, an independent, we have them as an independent contractor. Certain businesses obviously outsourcing accounting, that's an independent contractor. Some will, like yours, Richard, with your editor, that is an independent contractor. So they have to be able to pass some tests that have been identified, or some common rules. So they have behavioral, financial, and then the type of relationship. So they have, under behavioral, it's kind of like, does the business or company have the right to control what the worker does or how they do their job? Do they have, the right to direct that you are in the office from 9 to 5, or, you're clocking in or out, or telling them, exactly how they're doing the job. I think part of this too is they expect that whoever you're hiring has previous experience or knowledge in whatever services they're giving, for your business. Financially, this kind of comes down to how the worker's paid, whether the expenses are reimbursed, if you're providing tools or supplies. If you are bringing in an independent contractor to work for you, it's expected that they have their own tools or supplies. You're not providing them equipment. You wouldn't be reimbursing their expenses. That's something that they're covering under their own business or, themselves personally. And then definitely the type of relationship, if there's a written contract, if they're getting any sort of employee type benefits like insurance or pensions or, anything like that, they are definitely employee. And then, the status of the ongoing relationship, if it's a, something that, how would I word this? If the person's business would no longer be a business, it's kind of questionable if they're actually an independent contractor. That would be more like you're employing them for a job versus they still have other clients or could get other clients or other, sources of income. So I don't know. There's a lot that goes into the independent contractor world. I think it gets scrutinized because it gets abused, to try to avoid paying some of the employer and employee taxes. So it gets put under a microscope, but when used properly, 1099 contractors are an amazing thing for small business owners to be able to utilize.
Second that. I presume you
it helps
do
bridge
too,
a gap.
Oh
It
yeah,
sure
no,
does.
it bridges the gap. Well, I was just going to ask you. I mean, Richard, you're growing now, but you're not at a point where one, it probably doesn't make sense to bring someone in full time. But two, people that are editors. That's what they do for other podcasts. So instead of hiring an editor in, you've outsourced that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Although I would love to have a full-time person. In fact, the person who's been helping me with editing is terrific. I could see her having a greater role in this if our timing was better. But right, it's not a full-time position. Not that there isn't plenty of work that could be done, but it's very measured for me. And both of you have reached that thrust where you've been able to really bring them in on a more fervent basis.
Yeah. But we did it the same way you did, Richard.
Yeah.
Actually, in marketing, we reached a point where we couldn't do all the copywriting or email writing, as it were, and all of that. And we have a colleague who not only does this full time, but on the side also has other clients that they work with. And we were like, hey, do you have more hours available to pick up yet another client?
Mm-hmm.
And so we hired them as a contractor to help us with, our email marketing and some copywriting. And that really helped kind of bridge that gap for us. Funny thing is it was so good, we still contract with them. We did not end up hiring that internally because they provide such a good service that we were like, this makes total sense to just keep it this way. And instead we hired employees for other areas. But we've contracted out for other things like projects, specialized projects where we don't, we don't focus in that area. So we were like, you know what? We do everything else in this project, but this piece, we're going to contract this out. For instance, like videographers, photography,
Mm-hmm.
when doing new websites or marketing materials, one needs all of that. And so we'll contract out, in a 1099 fashion to a single photographer or another agency, videography, et cetera. to get those assets that clients need. And those are all short term, so that all works. And yeah.
So
Better
not
than
everyone
creating a
you've
whole media
hired.
department.
Right. Not everyone
Yeah,
you've
so not
hired then is a contractor.
No, not at all. No, we've got
Yeah.
W-2 employees. Totally.
Yep.
Yeah, no. That would be, I think, a violation of that IRS definition. If everyone we hired was contractor, no,
Yeah.
we'd have no business if they disappeared. But it makes me really interested. And I'm going to have to look this up a bit because I know businesses that are all based on this, where it's like they've got a sales rep and an office that's basically like processing, but all of their work is done by contractors somewhere, contracted in some way. For instance, I know there are web agencies where they sell a website, but they don't do the designing, they don't do the building, they don't do the hosting. All they do is the selling. That's
Right.
it.
Yeah. They have partners seemingly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they have partners that they work with, and it's interesting. I don't think it's a foul. It's just it's interesting how these models and everything work. I know the spirit of the law, right, Brigitte? I think is more like to not abuse people. Yeah, that's really what the spirit is. So yeah,
and really, government has tried to get into that a little bit and try to, and that is enough to make some people go, oh boy. But we've seen it, right? California, for example, and even our state, Michigan, is looking at it. The idea that there are, as Brigitte mentioned, some abuses out there, and they've been trying to create legislation that would help curtail some of those abuses. And so we've seen some of that take place.
And honestly, with all of that, I hope that their end goal is to make it more clear of what counts and does not count as a 1099. I like to think the best of people and believe that most are not trying to abuse it. And when they get caught up and realize that they weren't following the guidelines and the fees and the penalties and just what they get slapped with is enough to honestly close a business. And it may not have been their intention to ever break, the rules around a 1099er. So my word of advice there is to just really make sure that you are confident that whoever you are hiring in a 1099 status, that you've dotted your I's, crossed your T's to make sure that they really fit what they would view as a 1099, so you don't end up in one of those positions. So I think if they could figure out how to, give more clear direction as what does and what does not count, that would be a benefit to the changes in laws that they may be looking at. But to try to change it where it makes it where small businesses can't use them at all, I think would be detrimental to the small business world.
Huge.
Yeah.
And
honestly, to the businesses that are set up as a 1099 contractor, that would demolish their business as well, which is not, to me, in the spirit of what this country should be about. So,
well, these are discussions that are happening as we're having ours about all of this, and we certainly have seen some states like California, for example, pass legislation in this regard and then follow it with a lot of amendments to try and correct some of that, which is, to your point, Brigitte, about the broadness of some of the language involved in some of that, and that concerns people. And I think most of us who are in business, I'm going out on a limb here, but probably don't want it to be that broad, because we want this kind of assistance. And I know I wouldn't be able to have the help I have without this ability, and neither would the two of you.
Yeah, and on top of that, I mean, the 1099 contractors, like what Brigitte said, those people that like that environment and want to work in that way, it's huge for them. I mean, that's a business. They have their own business. They're working with other individuals, or they like that autonomy and they want to work on contracts and never be at one place for too long. Like, that's who they are, and they enjoy that. So if it gets too difficult, they can't even do that. So that'd be a detriment. Yeah.
So I presume, Brigitte, you get asked about this in your capacity a fair amount, right? The folks who are your clients are typically asking you about 1099s and the boundaries of that and so on.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a hot topic. And more of advice, like, and I appreciate that they ask me before they make decisions on that, to just, okay, let's run through it, walk through what their contract's going to be. Let's talk about, could this be, construed as maybe they aren't a contractor, because you are having quite a bit of direction over what they're doing. And I like to outline then, okay, what would it actually cost you to have them on as a part-time employee? What is the actual additional fees to maybe avoid any sort of issues down the road? And I think a lot of my clients are surprised that it isn't a huge expense, and you get the peace of mind that you're doing the things the right way and you aren't going to get penalized in the end. So it's really just evaluating that relationship. And if it's a contractor you're using that has an established LLC of some sort, that really helps, because then you know that they probably have other clients that they're doing the same exact thing for you, like doing it for them as well. And that can help you if you were to ever get questioned about their, if they really were a 1099 contractor. So yeah, just really going through and evaluating what that relationship looks like is the best advice I can give, and leaning on the professionals that deal with it almost every day to ask those questions and just make sure. And if they are a 1099 contractor, making sure you're getting their W-9 and having that on file, making sure you have that contract signed, having that defined scope of work identified, and giving them the 1099 at the end of the year.
Interesting. So if a person does not have an LLC and they're performing a task for you and you're calling them a contractor, does it make them less than that if they don't have an LLC in the eyes of the IRS?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Not necessarily. I would caution that person about that, though, because they're performing services where they could be held liable personally. They don't have that LLC protection.
Right.
And to establish an LLC, I think we've talked about this on another episode, is very easy, not expensive, and it protects them personally. I would ask them, though, and you have a right to ask that, which you probably already did when you started working with them, if they have other clients that they perform like services for, or, that ability or whatever they're bringing to the table. I would assume, because they're doing that for you, they are doing it for others. But that could be a question in your process of bringing somebody on to be a contractor, asking if they provide those services for others. Not having an LLC does not disqualify them, but I would certainly caution them against not having that protection.
All right. Well, we would be interested in hearing what your successes have been with contractors. I would imagine there's plenty within the sound of our voices who are in similar positions as we, and they are looking at potential growth that has to happen incrementally. And in doing so, a 1099 contractor would be helpful to allow them to have that growth. But like me and the both of you at one point, were not ready to hire an employee, an actual W-2 employee. And that has provided for the growth at the pace that we need, right? Without the situation where you either have to have a W-2 employee or not. So it is tremendously valuable. Tell us what you've done in those cases at whatthebiz.com. There is a little voicemail clicking you can do there and leave us a message. Tell us what you've done, what successes you've had, and maybe you'd rather just send us a little note. You can do that too on the website also. Dan and Brigitte will be back again soon, and we hope you will be back with us as well on What the Biz.